Great. Okay. Gang, thanks for joining me this afternoon as we talk about tobacco or nicotine cessation, which is a tricky word. And my name is Katie Chiasson-Downs. I work for the behavioral medicine department here in Morgantown. In terms of disclosures, I don't have any financial disclosures or conflicts of interest to report. I do want to say that generative AI was used as an efficiency tool to proofread my slides. This is the first time I'm using that, trying to get on board with that. All of the content is my information, conclusions are my responsibility, but always want to say that AI did help me proofread my slides. I also want to share I'm a former smoker myself. I quit in 2008, thank goodness, almost 20 years ago. But I actually still miss it today. That's how powerful nicotine and tobacco is, that almost 20 years later, when I'm watching a movie, I think, oh boy, that person's smoking a cigarette, that looks good to me. And then I also want to say tobacco cessation is important to me for many reasons. Most notably, I lost my father in 2015 due to cancer that was most definitely caused by his lifelong tobacco addiction. Sorry, Dad, for throwing you under the bus in this presentation, but so that's one of many reasons I want to talk about it today. I will say sometimes for me, when I have slides open, it's hard for me to pay attention to the chat. So Kelly or Chantry, I'll ask you all if there's a chat question that pops up that's like really pertinent for me I'll make a point to try to take a break from time to time. But in case I'm missing something, please holler at me. So here's our objectives today. We're going to describe the health risks associated with tobacco and nicotine use and the benefits of quitting. We're going to identify evidence-based tobacco cessation treatments, including behavioral counseling and FDA-approved medications. We're going to demonstrate how to use a brief tobacco cessation intervention, such as the 5 A's, to support patients who use tobacco or nicotine. And then finally, we're going to recognize the common barriers to quitting and discuss strategies to help patients develop their kind of own personalized quit plan in the hopes of helping them maintain long-term abstinence. We'll quickly chat about the various terms out there related to nicotine use, and then we'll also look at the numbers in terms of current usage in the US and West Virginia in this section of the slides. So there are differences between tobacco use and nicotine use, but those terms often get used interchangeably. And in fact, you're going to hear me use them interchangeably in these presentations based on whose references I'm using and the words that they're referencing when they talk about it. So nicotine cessation is technically more accurate if your goal is to address, all nicotine use, because while that covers things like cigarettes and cigars and chewing rub, that also covers kind of commercially available nicotine vapes. Those typically don't contain any specific tobacco leaf material. Some of them is actually derived from tobacco, though. So I will say public health organizations like American Health Association, the CDC group, they're often both referring to tobacco cessation, and tobacco use disorder is still the current official DSM diagnosis. Just, quick little lesson. So nicotine is a naturally occurring psychoactive and highly addictive stimulant found in tobacco plants. It can be absorbed through the lungs, mucous membranes, or the skin. Tobacco is the plant that nicotine is found in, and so tobacco refers to any plant of the genus Nicotiana, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and its leaves are dried and cured. So tobacco can be used in smoking products like cigarettes, cigars, can also be found in smokeless products like chewing tobacco or dip. And then we have e-cigarettes and vapes referring to the same thing. I think we used the term e-cigarette, I feel like much more when they first came out, which is the technical term of the device. Vaping is the sort of act of using it. That tends to be the term that we're using more today. These are these battery operated devices that heat a liquid and they produce an aerosol or a vapor. And then finally, there are oral pouches. So Zyn is a common brand of oral nicotine pouches. They're small, smokeless, tobacco-free pouches containing a white nicotine powder that are mixed with flavorings and other kind of additives. And then just a reminder, these days, if your patients tell you that they smoke or vape, you also need to follow up with asking them what they're smoking or vaping. Once upon a time, we could assume they're talking about tobacco, but they may also be they may be referring to they're using THC products. And if we haven't asked that, we may overlook that.
Katie, you had a comment in the chat. Sorry.
Yes.
It says, I quit 6 years ago during COVID lockdowns and still every now and again think, oh, I should go grab a pack or think how good one would be. Thank you for normalizing that.
Oh, I feel that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And who quits during COVID? If I had a gold star to give you over Zoom, I 100% would. That is incredible. Kudos to you. I do want to point out the US has come a long way in decreasing nicotine use. The very first Surgeon General's report on smoking and health came out in 1964, during a time in which more than 40% of the adult population smoked. And so at the time, once that link was created between smoking and its medical consequences, once that became a part of the public consciousness, education efforts and public policy changes quickly began, and that resulted in a lot of substantial declines in smoking rates in the U.S. to half of that 1964 level. However, rates of cigarette smoking and other tobacco use are still too high, and some proportions are disproportionately affected. So from 2023 to 2024, 18.8% of the US population used nicotine, 9.9% of folks smoked cigarettes, which was down from 11.5%, that's good. 7% either used vape or e-cigarettes. That's unfortunately up from 3.8%. 3.7 smoke cigars, and 2.6 use smokeless tobacco and nicotine pouches. Now I think we've talked about the stat before, and I want to talk about it again. If we look at 2024, for example, approximately 54,000 people in the US died from an overdose. That's awful. That's too many. And a good reason why opioid addiction and treatment is often kind of what's considered front page news. However, cigarette smoking is still the leading cause of preventable death in the US. It kills more than 480,000 people a year. That number also includes around 41,000 deaths resulting from secondhand smoke exposure. So why it's so important for us to continue talking about it. We'll look specifically at West Virginia. So West Virginia's adult smoking rate has decreased from 25.2 in 2021 to 20.4 in 2023. That's awesome. Congrats. The overall adult tobacco use rate, however, has increased when you combine vaping and smokeless tobacco forms. I'm going to try to go a little quickly through data just to spend more time to the end. So these stats are taken from the West Virginia Tobacco Use Prevention and Cessation Task Force annual legislative report. This is from last December 2025. I won't read through all of them, but I will recognize that first section in terms of where we're standing with national rates. So for example, while we are at 20.4 of adults or current smokers, if we're comparing that, the national average is 12.1. 7.6 of adults use smokeless tobacco products, and the national rate's only 3.4. And then back to e-cigarettes, our rate is 10.1, where the national rate is 7.7. So not the top of the lists that we really want to be on in the state. There could really be a whole separate presentation on nicotine use among our West Virginia youth, specifically talking about prevention and treatment that's tailored to that population. In the interest of time today, I'm going to be talking globally about treatment, but I do want to share some of these bummer facts for our West Virginia youth. So as you can see, 6.2% of high school students report currently using smokeless tobacco products, where the national average is only 1.5. And 13% of high school students report daily use of electronic vapor products, while the national average is only 7.8. All right, I'm through the bummer data part of the presentation. So let's move on to talking about how nicotine works and why people use it. So how nicotine works, it can be absorbed into the body a few different ways based on the product that you're using. And then what that also means is that how fast the nicotine hits your system depends on how you're using it. So when you smoke cigarettes, for example, nicotine rapidly reaches peak levels in the bloodstream and then it enters the brain. If you're using chew, for example, nicotine reaches peak blood and brain levels a little bit more smoothly based on how it's coming into your body. Immediately after exposure to nicotine, there's a release of multiple chemical messengers. We've got dopamine. That's what creates that immediate feeling of pleasure, relaxation, reward in our brain. We've got acetylcholine that enhances our memory, attention, and motor abilities. And then we also have norepinephrine and adrenaline. So this stimulates the nervous system, increases our heart rate, our blood pressure, and our alertness. Let's talk about the health risks associated with tobacco use. Gang, I will tell you this list is not extensive. I just couldn't fit everything on the slide. That's how much harm tobacco use causes. I'm going to speak really more to the I'm going to speak more to the harms of nicotine on a separate slide, and you'll see why then. So for now, I'm just going to focus on the other stuff that's involved when we use nicotine. So many of the most severe consequences of combustible tobacco products are caused by the other chemicals in the tobacco smoke. Although, again, nicotine itself does create some cardiovascular and addictive effects. So there are more than 7,000 chemical components found in cigarette smoke. Hundreds of them are harmful to human health, and cigarette smoking harms nearly every organ in the body. Smoking causes lung diseases such as chronic bronchitis, emphysema, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, and it's been found to exacerbate asthma symptoms in adults and children. Smoking also substantially increases the risk of heart disease, including stroke, heart attack, vascular disease, and aneurysms. We'll chat about what took down my father, which we refer to in my house as the big C, which is cancer. So smoking increases lung cancer risk 5 to 10-fold, with greater risk among heavy smokers. Smoking is also associated with cancers of the mouth, the pharynx, larynx, esophagus, stomach, pancreas, cervix, kidney, and bladder. That's how much. Cigarette smoking is not the only form of tobacco use associated with cancers, though. Smokeless tobacco has also been linked to cancer of the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the lungs, as well as colorectal cancer. Smoking is also linked to other major health conditions, things like arthritis, inflammation, and general impaired immune function. And then we also have to think about secondhand and third-hand smoke complications. So exposure to environmental tobacco smoke among non-smokers increases lung cancer risk by about 20%. And it's also a risk factor for asthma in kiddos. Smoking also leaves a chemical residue on surfaces where smoking has occurred. So that's what's known as third-hand smoke. This is kind of increasingly recognized as a potential danger, especially to children who are not only inhaling the fumes that are released by these residues, but they're also ingesting the residues that maybe get on their hands after, they're crawling on floors, they're touching surfaces, things like that. That's me and my papa. So as always, if there's a habit or a behavior that we want to help our patients change, what we first have to do is meet them with empathy and understanding. We have to understand that the active nicotine is helping fill a need in the moment. And what we get to do is help our patients identify what that need is. And that's really important before we expect them to just be able to change it. So why do people start using nicotine to begin with? For some folks, that might be a part of their cultural rituals or a regular part of family behaviors. For some, they may try it because they're curious, their social circle is using it, and they feel pressured to join in. And then for others, the lure of advertisements and how it's portrayed in the media may be a reason that they try it. People continue to use nicotine because it acts on the brain's reward system to deliver quick feelings of pleasure, stress relief, enhanced focus, which we'll talk more about. I think it's in the next slide. And then sometimes for my patients, Jeremy Husted, yes.
Sorry, John, unmute. I always forget how to. The one of the things with the media and portrayal, etc., is there's a thing called fourth hand smoke, which is kind of weird smoking. So actually seeing it raises your risk, like you're saying. So it's sometimes referred to as like fourth hand smoke.
Fourth hands, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So
I believe, I said in the beginning, I'm a former smoker. It's been almost 20 years. I'm glad I don't smoke. It's when I see particular TV shows or movies when they're smoking in that I think to myself, that looks good.
Yep.
So
that's your fourth hand smoke.
That's my fourth hand smoke. Thank you. That's awful. That's great and awful. For some of my patients, I've also tried to explain to them For some of them, they will say, you know, smoking relaxes me. And I will talk with them about there's a good chance that when they are smoking, that's the best breathing they have done that day. Because when you're smoking a cigarette, what are you doing? You're taking a nice long deep inhale in. For some people, they're holding that cigarette or smoke for a little bit, and then they're exhaling it all out. So, you know, while they're breathing in some crap in the process, that might be their most deep breathing that they have done all day. And then, of course, the most obvious reason, nicotine is highly addictive, and over time, people continue to use it to avoid the irritability and cravings of withdrawal. Has anybody, so here's what I encountered in my research. Has anybody heard of nicotine biohacking? I'm going to keep if anybody's, I was able to, it's so cool. I was able to see the yellow hand when Dr. Husted raised his. If anybody else is able to do that, it will show up on my screen. So that was new to me in this process. So some wellness influencers are encouraging people to use nicotine. Typically, they're encouraging the use of the gum or the pouches as a quote unquote clean productivity hack. So the idea is to use nicotine specifically to enhance mental focus and optimize physical workouts. So let's review what some of the benefits of nicotine are. So nicotine works by binding to receptors in the brain. These receptors aid learning, memory, and attention. They protect nerve cells from dying. By stimulating some pathways in the brain, nicotine may enhance cognitive performance. Can also increase levels of dopamine and norepinephrine, which sharpens alertness and focus. The impact of nicotine on acetylcholine is also generating interest in its possible use for treating something like Alzheimer's, which involves a decline in acetylcholine as the disease progresses. And then there are a few human studies and clinical trials that have demonstrated the cognition enhancing impacts of nicotine. Having said that, the evidence is mixed on whether nicotine may protect against cognitive decline or dementia. And long-term research on that is limited. And in fact, some preclinical research, the results actually show that it worsens those effects, not in fact makes it better. I will also point out all those risks that nicotine can bring you. There are also so many other things that can bring you those benefits, things like exercise, nutrition, proper sleep, things besides nicotine. Nicotine itself is not harmless, but what happens is that because certain products are marketed as smoke-free, I think some people think smoke-free means harm-free. So let's talk about those harmful risks. Because nicotine delivers a rapid and intense surge of dopamine, this leads to a rapid tolerance and dependency. For individuals under 25 whose brains are still maturing, nicotine exposure can negatively impact attention, memory, learning, and impulse control. Certain nicotine products that are absorbed through the gums or through the mouth can cause gum recession and mouth lesions. Nicotine triggers the release of adrenaline, so that causes our blood vessels to narrow, heart rates to spike, blood pressure to rise. And so over time, that kind of chronic stress on our cardiovascular system then increases the risk of heart disease and stroke. Nicotine causes other systemic issues like peptic ulcers, impact on reproductive health, and then decreased immune response. So in summary, for now, the current evidence does not support routine nicotine use for cognitive enhancement in healthy individuals, and the risks of dependence outweigh any potential benefits. One researcher said nicotine is under investigation, but it is not ready for prime time, which I liked that quote. Okay, let's head on over to the treatment section of today's talk. We'll talk first about evidence-based counseling recommendations, then we'll talk about approved medications, and then we'll talk about strategies to utilize when we're facilitating those treatments. Let me double check, see if there's anything. Chantry or Kelly, I don't see anything in the chat that I missed. Cool. I'm going to take a quick watering hole break. Okay, so good news. There's a variety of approaches to smoking cessation counseling that are available and helpful. So we have cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that before. This helps patients identify triggers, the people, places, things that spur behavior, and teaches folks relapse prevention skills and effective coping strategies to avoid smoking in the face of those stressful situations and triggers. We've got motivational interviewing on here. So counselors are helping patients explore and resolve their ambivalence about quitting smoking and enhance their motivation to make healthy changes. It's patient-focused, it's non-confrontational. Providers are pointing out discrepancies between patients' goals or values and their current behaviors, but doing so in a very non-judgmental, respectful way. They adjust their approach to the patient's resistance to change, and they're really trying to support self-efficacy and optimism. In mindfulness-based treatments, patients are learning to increase their awareness of and detachments from sensations, thoughts, and cravings that may lead them to wanting to relapse. So in this therapy, patients are purposefully attending to those thoughts that trigger cravings, and reframing them as, expected and tolerable. And then they also learn techniques to help them kind of tolerate negative emotions. All states offer quit lines with smoking cessation counselors who provide information and support. We'll review those specifically towards the back half of this. And then finally, technology. So, being able to use text messaging, calling, web-based services, the social media platforms. This can also be used to provide smoking cessation interventions. It's really, how can we extend care? How can we connect people to maybe other peers or other providers? And that's also been really helpful when we talk about folks that have geographical barriers to get to in-person treatment. That's been vital. Okay, let's identify evidence-based tobacco cessation medications. So a variety of nicotine replacement therapies are available over the counter. Things like the patch, gum, lozenges. These are very effective for cessation. So nicotine replacement therapies, or I'll call them NRTs, they stimulate the brain receptors targeted by nicotine. They help relieve those withdrawal symptoms and cravings that lead to relapse. Use of NRT improves smoking cessation outcomes, and then adding behavioral therapies on top of that really further increases quit rates. And then also a combination. So oftentimes folks will be recommended to use the patch and gum or the patch and lozenge. That's been found to be more effective at relieving withdrawal symptoms than maybe just one single type of NRT. There's also bupropion, so also known as Wellbutrin. That's an antidepressant. It works by inhibiting the reuptake of norepinephrine and dopamine as well as stimulating their release. It's been found to increase quit rates compared with placebo and equally effective to NRT. There's varenicline, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, also known as Chantix. So that helps reduce nicotine cravings. Excuse me, increases the likelihood of quitting compared with placebo. Some studies find that it's more effective than single forms of NRT and bupropion. Some studies suggest that combining NRT with other medications will also increase the chances of cessation. So for example, combining varenicline and NRT was more effective than just the varenicline alone. And then same thing if you combine bupropion and the NRT, that also improves cessation rates. I'll give some honorable mentions here to medications or interventions they're maybe currently looking at. So they are looking at some other antidepressants to see if that will be helpful. For example, a few small studies suggested that nortriptyline is equally effective as NRT. I believe that's still in the early stages. They're looking at promising medications and ongoing research. So they're looking at research is focusing on the receptors targeted by nicotine in the brain circuits and regions known to influence nicotine consumption. They're also looking at potentially a nicotine vaccine. They're also looking at TMS, so transcranial magnetic stimulation. This is a physiological intervention. So research for that is in the early stages and has shown promise. And again, I think mentioned earlier, combining the two. So if we can combine counseling and medication, adults who have the best chance of quitting for good are folks that are using both of those resources together. So I've included this slide about vape in the treatment section of today's talk for a specific reason, because some people are seeing vaping as a treatment for tobacco cessation. So e-cigarettes emerged in the US market in 2007 and have rapidly grown in popularity. People are sometimes transitioning to e-cigarettes as a mechanism to quit cigarettes, but the research on that is mixed. So a number of studies suggest that e-cigarettes with nicotine may help quit adults quit smoking compared to e-cigarettes without nicotine or no treatment. However, other data suggests that this can impede quitting or in fact open the door to traditional cigarette use for people who maybe hadn't tried them to begin with. What is definitely true, however, is that e-cigarettes are not a safe alternative to smoking. So they heat liquids into an aerosol that's loaded with other substances, including additive nicotine, cancer-causing chemicals, heavy metals, ultrafine particles that are settling deep into the lungs. So inhaling these toxins can also lead to irreversible damage. So for example, it can cause severe lung damage. It can affect our brain development. It can affect our development of addiction in general. It can create heart hazards. And again, it's giving us exposure to toxic chemicals and metals. So let's move back over to helpful strategies we as providers can utilize when we're working with people that use nicotine. So the first strategy highlight is the 5 A's. The 5 A's is an evidence-based clinical framework designed to help healthcare providers deliver a very brief, 3 to 5 minute tobacco cessation intervention. And so the 5 A's are to ask, advise, assess, assist, and arrange. So right off the bat, we want to make sure that we're identifying and documenting tobacco use status for every patient at every visit. When they are identifying as somebody that uses tobacco or nicotine, we want to urge all users to quit in a very clear, strong, but personalized manner for that person. We want to determine the patient's willingness or readiness to make a quit attempt at this time. So using the stages of change to assess where they're at. We want to assist the willing client or the willing patient with a quit plan, coping skills, and pharmacotherapy, and then other referrals if needed. We want to schedule a follow-up contact, ideally within the first week after that first planned quit date. I'm going to check and see if I have a chat. I don't think so. So as we're helping people quit, we want to warn them about the nicotine withdrawal symptoms that they may experience. That way they can be prepared for that and have a plan in place to manage those symptoms. So trying to quit smoking feels different for each person, but almost everyone will have some symptoms of nicotine withdrawal. So when you stop, your brain and body have to get used to not having nicotine, and this can be uncomfortable. So being without nicotine for too long can cause a regular user to experience irritability, craving, depression, anxiety, cognitive and attention deficits, sleep disturbances, and increased appetite. That's my example of my dad having sleep issues. When a person quits smoking, withdrawal symptoms peak within the first few days of the last cigarette smoked and usually subside within a few weeks. For some people, however, symptoms can persist for months, and the severity of withdrawal symptoms can sometimes actually appear to be influenced by the person's genes, which I found interesting. So that's one strategy highlight. Another strategy highlight is to explore the benefits of quitting. So instead of just harping on the negatives of tobacco use, which we can accidentally do, we can also help emphasize the positives of staying nicotine-free. So here's just some examples. They get a decrease in risk for health complications. There's a decrease in risk for health complications of the loved ones that you are around. There's an improvement in physical appearance. I've had so many patients who have talked in therapy about, feeling shame about specifically their kind of mouth appearance, their dental appearance, and it's even caused them to sort of not smile as much to other people because they feel shame about that. Same thing for increased personal hygiene. I've had patients who have talked about the shame they feel because their loved ones don't want to kiss them or don't want to hug them because of how they smell because of their smoking. Improvement in breathing and sleep overall, increase in finances. For some folks, they're going to be able to kind of keep a distance from what could happen in their health long term. But when they talk about current things that are affecting right now, they'll say, listen, I don't really care about my health, but what I do know is I just can't afford to smoke anymore. So it's really about finding the individual reasons that they feel motivated to do that. This list is definitely not complete. So you all tell me, what am I missing from this? Oh, let me go backwards. Anything that you think should be honored here? And I'll add it from future ones. Any other reasons that are good to quit?
Societal pressure.
Oh, I like it. I'm gonna add that societal pressure.
Stigma is not a good thing in general, but there's become more and more of a negative connotation to smoking, which
Yes.
has reduced rates, stopped less people from using, but that's been
Someone
offset
put
by
in the,
e-cigarettes.
oh,
Yes,
sorry.
great point. Yeah, thank
Somebody
you,
had put,
Haley. Yes, not having some, not needing something to have to be able to feel well. I love that. I'm gonna write all these down and add to the slide. Keeping up with the kids, grandkids. Samantha, that's actually a great point. Staying alive for future family. I love that. Oh, Sarah, good point. Sarah wrote recovery from surgery. Some surgeons won't even do a surgery if somebody smokes. Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, faster just recovery in general. Great point. They won't they wouldn't give my mom a new hip until she quit. I was not aware that that was a limitation.
So smoking delays healing. So yeah, sometimes surgeons will just flat out refuse to treat a smoker because they're more likely to develop complications after surgery.
Is it based on the type of surgery or just the surgeon themselves? Either some surgeons are just zero tolerance or
If it's an elective surgery, you don't have to do anything if it's an elective surgery. But yeah, any surgery, theoretically, the risk of infection is higher and
yeah.
delayed healing. So
Oh, I love that. Stephanie wrote, I quit so I could do better in the gym. I lost weight and realized I love the gym. Oh, Stephanie, I love that. Right on.
Also acts as a vasoconstrictor, so it reduces the blood circulation, so it slows down the healing in that way
yeah,
also.
yeah.
Oh, great point. Thanks, gang. Thanks for this list. Okay, I lost my, oh, hold on, I missed a track. Oh, Samantha said I helped schedule some of the evaluations for certain transplants and they need to quit smoking for a while to be approved. Yeah. Yep, I should add this to the list then.
Just as a small point of interest, in the days of Williamsburg, when it was first starting and tobacco was being used, the tobacco smelled better than the people, so it was also used as a deodorant.
Oh, just having it burning, sort of acting as a deodorant?
Having it burning, similar to pipes, tobacco itself. Then
Yeah.
later on, you ended up with other types of things that were scented. But yes, that's one of the things that people thought that was good about it.
Oh, that's an interesting. Thank you for that. Okay, let's talk now about a plan of action that we can give our patients, and you guys are welcome to sort of, take these slides and just kind of hand them over to patients. So the 5 keys for quitting, this is from the website quitassist.com, and at the end of this presentation, I also have a couple different websites you can point your patients in the direction of. So their 5 keys for patients are: number 1, get ready; number 2, get support and encouragement; number 3, learn new skills and behaviors; number 4, utilize medication; and then 5, be prepared for difficult situations. So that first step is to get ready. So helping our patients plan and prepare can really be a first helpful step. So can we help them choose a specific quit date? Help them identify, what is nicotine use costing them? And then also, again, if we kind of just focus on the negative, that's not always motivating for folks. So can we also think about the improvements that will happen in their life and health with quitting? Recognizing ahead of time what some of their triggers are. They may not know what all of them are until they hit them in the moment. And then think about what they've learned from past attempts to quit if they have tried to do that before. This website, and again, it's at the end of this presentation, they can go in and kind of build their own individualized quit plan in the website. Step 2 is get support and encouragement. So reminding folks they are not alone in their efforts to quit. Research definitely shows our odds are better if we get support from others. So can we talk to friends and family and coworkers about why we want to quit and how important it is? Can we also ask our support team to keep tobacco out of sight? Also encouraging our patients to get expert help. So can they Are they coming to us for support? Are there referrals we need to make for them based on what our role is? And then also utilizing our available quit line. Step 3 is learning new skills and behaviors. So you may not think of quitting tobacco, patients may not think of quitting tobacco as a skill, but it's like riding a bike, right? You figure out how to move forward, how to keep your balance, how to get where you want to go. If you end up falling off, you just get right back on and keep going. So can we help them plan ways to distract themselves, not if, but when they experience those urges to smoke or use? Can we have other things nearby to maybe hold in their hands? Look for fun activities that don't include tobacco. Again, be prepared to manage withdrawal symptoms so they're not a surprise when they come around. We've already talked about this first part again. I sort of kept this in the slide in case you wanted to share this directly with your patients. But step 4 is to utilize medication. So for many people, medication can be that key to helping quit. It can greatly increase our chances of quitting for good. And this talks about nicotine replacement therapy, and then whether a person's insurance's officer will covering NRT or other medications. And then speaking with healthcare providers about options that can help us quit. And then that, excuse me, the last one, step 5, is just preparing for those difficult situations. So for a lot of folks, it's that first step isn't the hardest one. Quitting isn't the biggest challenge. It's really staying smoke-free or tobacco-free. So I think the greatest risk for relapse is in those first 3 months of quitting. So how can we help them be prepared to handle those difficult situations and to also just get right back into your plan if a slip or lapse or relapse happens? Most smokers will need to make multiple attempts before they're able to quit permanently. So helping them find new ways to handle stress or calm nerves, reminding them to give themselves, grace and compassion, not shaming themselves when slips happen. Can we limit or moderate use of triggers, especially early on? Can we help eating nourishing foods, talking with them about eating nourishing foods and kind of overall movement to help manage their weight and mood? And then again, reminding ourselves all along the way, what are my benefits of quitting? What's the reasons that I want to do this? So as we're wrapping up, I want to share some specific resources. So here's the number to the West Virginia Tobacco Quit Line. Patients can call, text, or visit the website to enroll in the program. It's completely free and eligible to West Virginia residents who are 18 and older. You can get free NRT like patches, gum, or lozenges through the program. There's a particular process for doing that. You have to enroll. You have to participate in so many coaching calls over the phone. And then specifically in West Virginia, PEIA has their own separate tobacco cessation program. If you participate through theirs, they will cover prescription over-the-counter cessation drugs, I think for around, 2 12-week cycles. And then here's a few other websites that have lots of patient-friendly information on quitting nicotine use. And then again, include customizable quit plans. And then here's a link to a pharmacological product guide that gives dosing and dosing schedules for the medications that we discussed earlier. And then since I threw my dad under the bus a few times in the presentation, just wanted to honor him at the end. And then there's all my references. I feel like I missed some chat things. Let me see what I missed.